Hello folks, and welcome back to the Myths and Legends storytelling sessions. It's a very special one tonight. I come in here live from Friedelsborn restaurant in Swatra, a place that is very close to the grave of the most terrifying monster on earth. And so far this week we've covered the Headless Horseman, the giants, the warrior saints, and other demons that have run ragged across the Sperrin Mountains in Mid-Ulster. But tonight we're going to talk about the most fierce of all. Many years ago, when Bram Stoker wrote his book about Dracula, what he'd done was took stories from across Ireland and from across the world and merged them into one of the biggest fiction novels ever to exist. Dracula, in all his shapes and forms, has terrorized kids, adults, for years. He has amassed a cult following. People in their millions have travelled to the likes of Transylvania or Whitby in England to grab their piece of history or to search for the count. But you've all been looking in the wrong places. The origins of Dracula aren't Transylvania. The origins of the real vampire is here in the Sperrin Mountains, over in the Glen of the Eagle. So I'm going to warn you at this point, you want to snuggle up, grab your comfy blanket, maybe pour yourself a wee whiskey. Not too far from this pub, in the townland what's now called Glenull, lays the grave of the world's first vampire. And if you listen in now, I'm going to tell you a little bit about him. Dracula's real name is Abhartach. Abhartach was a cruel chief that ruled over the small kingdom called the Glen of the Eagle. It's situated here in the Sperrin Mountains, just a few miles from Swatra, Sloughneen, Garba. And he defended his lands brutally. But such were the customs of those times. The only difference was Abhartach treated his own people like he treated his enemies, and thought nothing of slaughtering his own people over petty quarrels. As time passed, the Glen of the Eagle became a no man's land. Nobody would go near it, shunned from the rest of society. But this didn't stop Abhartach. Now it's said that during these dark days, he spent quite some time at the Holy Wells over at what's now called Moninina. The wells over at Moninina are long known for being a training place for all the Irish warriors, where they went to learn their herbology, their potion making. But over there, Abhartach is said to have met a dark druid who possessed the evil man's mind even more and showed him how to make a potion to sustain his life forever. Abhartach also had a beautiful wife. Now, why he coveted her, he didn't pay her any attention. But as early Christian monks had begun to establish their churches in this area, she found her faith and calling with God. And she spent many nights praying for Abhartach, along with the local monks. Abhartach, who despised these holy men more than any, thought she was having an affair with them. And one night he climbed up the side of one of the chapels onto the roof. And in that chapel, his wife and the Christian monk were praying. Trying to get a better view, he slipped off the roof and some say fell to his death. The next morning, as the word of his demise spread across the land, there were celebrations. People couldn't believe that they're finally free of this monster. But little did they know this was only the beginning. And despite being a cruel man and treating his people badly, they still honoured him with the old Irish traditions and buried him in a grave standing up, just like they would do any other chieftain in the country. The celebrations went on that night. All the houses across the Glen of the Eagle were celebrating. But something else happened. There came a... What happened next was brutal. The local man opened the door and came face to face with Abhartach, and the fear that struck that man is still said to have caused a crack in the ground that is still there to this day. Abhartach instructed the man to cut his wrists, and being so afraid, the man dutifully done it. And under his wrist, Abhartach placed a bowl, collected the man's blood in the bowl, and drank it. And this happened right across the country that night. And at every door he stopped at, he made the people cut their wrists, and he drank more blood. The next day, terrified, people didn't know what to do. Eventually, the local people who lived in the Glen of the Eagle started to rise up against him. And they came and they cornered him and killed him. But that wasn't the end of it. So they sent word to the neighbouring tribes, calling for warriors to come and help them. And some warriors came, their chance to kill the Dwarf King. From Dungiven, Feeney, Claudy. And they cornered Abhartach, killed him again, and put him in the grave standing up. There were no celebrations that night. People went home, they closed their curtains, they locked their doors, they stoked their fires, and they waited. And they waited. But they didn't have to wait too long, because very soon that old familiar came at the door. But this time enraged, Abhartach made them cut their wrists, and he'd drained the entire blood out of their body, suckling on it through the bowl. People were dying all over the country. The fear, the panic, the terror. Can you imagine putting somebody in their grave twice? And he still got out of it. And with that feeling of fear that the local warriors had failed, they had no option. They had to call on the giants. They had to call on the giant warriors from Mid Ulster. Now the giants of Mid Ulster are well renowned and well known, but even when they heard the stories, they began to think, how could they, even of their great stature, kill this man? Some stories would say that it was Finn McCool that came up and fought Abhartach again because he was a giant. But Finn McCool to the Mid Ulster giants is the baby who hid from Benadonner. So the Mid Ulster giants, being related to St. Lura and a connection to the chapel in Mackara, made their way to the local monk and asked him for help. The monk prayed to God and asked for an answer. Now, a lot of times back in those days, it would have been the monk who'd have went and done battle with the beast and would have gained a sainthood from it. However, this time, the monk would only pass on the knowledge that he gained. And he told the giant warrior that you must take the branch of a yew tree, fashion it into a sword. Abhartach is already dead. You can't kill him. No one will ever be able to kill him. But you must pierce his heart with a sword. Place him face down in the ground in a grave that's lined with thorns to stop him from crawling out of it, and the ash tree to bind him. And once you've done this, place a huge rock over his head. So the giant set out, and he didn't have to go too far to find a yew tree. Most of the early Christian chapels were built in old pagan sites, of where the yew tree was plentiful. And word soon spread to the village that the giant warrior was coming, and the warriors from the surrounding lands armed themselves again, and the locals armed themselves as well. But Abhartach must have got wind of this, and in his fury and in his anger, everybody who he met, be it warrior or tribesman, he slaughtered them. The massacre is supposed to be so great that there are parts of Glenelg that people won't dig up today in fear of digging up bones. And finally they got him surrounded just outside Abhartach. And as Abhartach was making his last death rushes at the local warriors, the giant jumped in, slapped him over the field. The warriors went silent. The local people went silent. All you could hear was the torches burning in the night. But still mindful that Abhartach was a dreadful beast, the giant carefully walked over to Abhartach, stared down at him, took the yew sword and pierced his heart. And the giant instructed the warriors to dig a hole and to line it with the branches of a thorn tree, and to gather branches from an ash tree and lay a deathbed. And to make sure that Abhartach didn't move, the giant stood on the sword and pinned Abhartach to the ground. Once the warriors had finished this, the giant carefully took Abhartach, with the sword still in him, and pinned him on top of the blackthorn, and threw some more of the ash branches around him. The local warriors were about to fill the grave in when the giant stopped them. Slowly he walked over to a local dolmen, lifted the huge wedge stone and threw it on top of Abhartach. Abhartach has lay there ever since, staring into hell. So the first question is, and you can put it in the comments, who's willing to come with me on Halloween night to the grave of Abhartach? Any takers? I don't see anything in the comments yet, but they'll come. The most well-known horror figure in the world is based in the account of an old Irish chieftain, and not on the Transylvanian Count Dracula. As I've mentioned in other talks, there are powers in this country that we will never understand. There's an energy in Ireland that has enhanced magic, enhanced people, enhanced wisdom, enhanced knowledge. As time passes, people think they are fairy tales. They're not true. But this story has survived well over 1,000 years, right back to the start of Christianity in Ireland, when we did start to record our proper history. You might think I'm crazy, but at this time of year, especially coming up to Samhain, I won't leave the house if I'm going to the mountains without my dagger made of yew. And if he does rise again, who's going to put him back in his grave? Well, naturally, of course, you're going to have to look towards Mid-Ulster, towards the people who still carry that ancient giant gene to this very day. And hopefully that you can find a warrior big enough or brave enough to face him. But I'm ready for him. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for him. And if I come face to face with Abhartach and he looks into my eyes, he'll know that not only has he met a descendant of the Fomorians, he'll have met a descendant of the giants. Now I mightn't be able to lift the big capstone back into place, but I'm sure I can pin him to the ground long enough with this to make sure I get somebody who can. And let me tell you, this is not a story. This is not a fairy tale. This is real. And coming up to Samhain, when the land of the living meets the land of the dead, there'll be many beasts trying to cross that portal to rise Abhartach again. He is their key to taking over this world again and return it to the time before the Fair Bloke, before the ancient Sumerians, back to when this world was theirs. So hopefully you've learned something tonight, and learned that garlic's no use to this guy. Silver crosses, holy water. It's the branch of a yew tree fashioned into a dagger. That's the only thing that can pin him down, stop him. But always remember, you can't kill him. And hopefully I'll see you tomorrow night, and we'll have some more stories to tell. But until then, lock your doors. And if you hear tonight, don't open that door. Just run.